Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, those online and in person. I will start with just really unpacking, who is on the panel. And I think what's more important is just mentioning the countries that are represented here. So my name is Dumi. I am from Botswana. I am with Blaise from Nigeria, Alex from Ghana, Liberty from South Africa, and Denny from Kenya. And so we've got a diverse, panel of individuals. Apologies. Yeah, so we would definitely like to unpack diversity and inclusion beyond youth tokenism. And we're acknowledging, I don't know if that's me. Oh, goodness. The other mic, just maybe switch it off. Is it off? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so we want to unpack different elements of representation, what it looks like within the context of not just being co-opted, but in some instances being weaponized, and also really trying to understand within the dynamic of the 21st century citizen form of action. And so that having been said, I will ask for a short introduction, maybe 1 or 2 lines. Who are you? And what is your claim to activism, if I can say that, or your call to activism? And then lastly, what you've enjoyed so far with the ILGA conference. So maybe I will start with Alex.
I thought as much because my name is with an A, right? All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Kofi Donkor. I am from Ghana, and I also direct a group called LGBT Plus Rights Ghana. We work mostly on advocacy, activism, and also pushing the boundaries with regards to LGBTQ rights in Ghana. We are so resilient and mostly youthful individuals in there. And to be honest, I'm very grateful to all of them for all the efforts they bring onto the table. And then what I have enjoyed here at ILGA is the amazing diverse people that I've been able to connect with within this past days, and it's incredible. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Matthyse, and as the moderator has indicated, I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm also going to be lobbying in my introduction for support. So South Africa has put in a bid for the 2024 ILGA World Conference, and I'm from an organization called Gender Dynamix, and we, together with Iranti, has put in the bid. And just to say that we are a transgender-led, an authentically transgender-led organization. And through this bid, we want to just say that trans women of color, young trans women can take us to a successful conference in 2024. So please, if you have voting powers, make your cross at the right box for this particular elections. But then, as said, Gender Dynamix is a trans-led and trans-specific organization. We work in the disciplines of health, law, as well as education, and we use advocacy research and capacity strengthening as our drivers for change within those particular disciplines, both in South Africa, but also broadly speaking across Southern Africa.
Hi, everybody. My name's Denny Dumi. I'm a finance officer by profession, and I've worked mostly with queer funding organizations. I've worked with UHAI in East Africa, funding LGBTIQ queer and sex worker movements. And I've also worked with Frida, that has been global, financing mostly global South young feminist movements, including trans and LGBTIQ plus rights as well. And one thing that I've loved so far about the conference is just the diversity and the many ideas that are coming together and finding cross-collaborative mechanisms on our, our commonalities. So I'm seeing there's a lot of commonalities across the continent in different movements.
Hi, everyone. My name is Blaise. I am a non-binary LGBTQ rights activist based in Lagos, Nigeria. I am the co-founder of the Oasis Project. The Oasis Project is an organization, a youth-led and youth-focused organization that caters for LGBTQ Nigerians by creating underground safe spaces for them to have conversations around mental and sexual health. We also mobilize youth for social justice movement and create educational materials to sensitize the Nigerian public about LGBTQ rights, sexuality, gender, and other forms of expression. Our long-term goal as the World Oasis Means Shelter is to provide a permanent structure where we can house displaced LGBTQ people in Nigeria, because there are up to 9 laws that criminalizes LGBTQ people in Nigeria. And currently, there's a bill being considered in Parliament to further criminalize cross-dressers, and especially targeted at queer, trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming people, to put them behind bars for 6 months, and also have them pay a huge amount of money just for the way they dress. So I'm calling on all of us today to check out this bill currently in Nigeria that is being considered in Parliament.
Thank you so much, Blaise, Denny, Liberty, and Alex. I think it's really quite important to just recognize that, documenting the experiences of not just Black, but also African movements is really quite key. And I think ensuring that, we have that space to sort of exercise that agency and autonomy. And I guess more importantly, I think it's in highlighting, the fact that, we are a young panel. And I think within the context of development framing, UNFPA notes, in opposition to the rest of the UN agencies, that young people in Africa are an average of 32. This is because there's an assumption that at that age, one can be independent of their family and be considered a productive citizen in their countries. And so I think it's important for us to just note that. But I think, I will start by asking, are leaders born or made? And I will ask Liberty to take us on this journey.
Are leaders born or made? Leaders emerge probably in different ways, in different contexts, given circumstances. And also, I think from a feminist vantage point, I don't think that sometimes we have this very hierarchical understanding of what it means to lead within particular spaces. Like you have one leader and then everybody must be followers. But just through a feminist lens, that different people have different skill sets and different capabilities that we all bring together in a collective sense to be able to achieve change and make change happen within a particular context. And I think through that sense, and through that lens, for me, everybody can be a leader. Everybody can be a leader in a different way because of the different skills, capacities, and of course, talents we bring in order to make that change happen. So I don't think that leaders are born. I do think that leaders are made through very complex social processes that demands of us to step forward, step up, and offer what we can to contribute towards social transformation and progress.
Thanks so much, Liberty. I mean, you remind me of the words of Winnie Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela, and how she said she is a product of the conditions of the country that she was born in. And so I think, within this context, I'm then drawn by a conversation that I had with a funder that said that they were finding a lot of challenges with all the different movements that were happening amidst the pandemic, where they were seeking out a leader to engage and sort of try and see how they can then partner or collaborate with, whether it's with the hashtag #EndSSMPA, or with, Ghana Gets Better. And so I guess my question really, I'll start with you, Blaise, is why is there a must for engaging young people particularly in a collective movement, that have recognized that we are a collective, we are a movement. You can't have an individual and that serves as a movement on its own. So why do you think that it's important, especially when engaging young people, that we recognize and see the collective for what it is and the movement for what it is, without forcing to institutionalize or without forcing to create this aura around one activist, so to speak?
Thank you so much, Dumi. So I'd say for a very long time, we've all stuck to the idea of traditional ways of organizing, traditional ways of change making, which is following a linear direction. And if it does not go that way, it doesn't make sense. So we've never thought of diverse ways where how change can be made, or how people are able to impact their communities, maybe those very far from them or even around them. But with youth activism and young people comes different possibilities that we've never thought. With social media comes different ways and approaches of doing things. And young people are very much aware of this and the advantages of social media. That's why we utilize them in our movements, both globally and regionally and locally. One large movement like that happened in Nigeria was the NSAS movement. And the NSAS movement had a sub-movement, which was the Queer Nigerian Lives Matter movement. During the NSAS movement, the government was targeting people, the so-called leaders of this movement. But they couldn't place one person as the leader, because movement like that does not require any form of leadership unless collective leadership, where we can all come together and map out ways we can all stand up for ourselves. And if this movement had a leader, the government would have targeted that person and scapegoated that person. But they know as a collective, we are not easily penetrated. So they could not really influence any of these leaders to change their minds on this request they made. And with Ghana also, you see how before now, LGBTQ rights are not so heard in the continent, in that region. But with social media and the Kill the Bill hashtag in Ghana, the conversation has gone within, it has gone outside the region, and now it's on a global level. So I think we have to reimagine ways in which we organize as activists and as leaders. Some ways are very old-fashioned and they don't work at this period of time. And other ways that are very new are paving ways. So as funders, we also need to amplify the voices of young people who are really creating this change in different regions. And we need to understand the dynamics of our movement. There are different approaches to it. And the end goal of it is to just create change, the change we want, positive change, a better environment for us, where we can be seen, and where we can be protected. That is what we want. So the approaches we take, therefore, should be diverse and should be very, very inclusive of everybody who is interested in it. And young voices at this point shouldn't be silenced.
Thank you so much, Blaise. And since you've opened it up and kept it into West Africa, I think it's important, and Alex, maybe in your own perspective, it'll be great to sort of appreciate your own journey, right, and coming into leadership and recognizing at least with some of the experiences that sort of I've come across, is that young people don't always get that protection and that safety to not just survive, but also to thrive. They don't get the opportunity and the space to exercise exercise agency within the context of development or even within the existing movement. And that's why they carve out their own journey, where they created different ways of engaging, where, there's digital activism, there's, feminist collective, that are anchored on mutual aid. And so from your own journey and your own story, why do you think it's important to harness that talent and that diversity, especially when someone is coming with so much passion and energy, and they haven't been limited by some of the more linear funding parameters around the M&E indicators and reporting measures or institutionalizing?
Thank you so much, Dumi, for this question. And just like you mentioned, I would even look at it from like personal experiences with regards to organizing, even as a young person, in a space that is like mostly controlled by already existing leaders who sort of don't really believe or feel that there is a need for younger people to have their own space and to be able to organize and to be able to identify the situation or the circumstances in which we are and the dynamics within which these circumstances exist, right? And so I would even want to move it a little bit away from even funders, right? And even just look at it in general, as in how we, even as a movement, view ourselves and how we, as a movement, should have that conscious effort to support ourselves irrespective, right? And now, so this is how I'm going to take it. And I'm going to limit it to even the LGBTQ community in Ghana, because that's where I've mostly functioned for the longest. Now, I came into a space where it already had some existing leaders within the movement. I've been in spaces with them for so many times. And so it was during my engagement in those spaces was where I was able to identify some loopholes to which I felt that maybe work can also be looked at in that manner, right? And then you suggest some of these approaches to them, and then they don't seem to grasp it or they don't seem to get it. And I can understand that the reason why you would not get it, because that is not something that you have thought of from that perspective, right? And just like Liberty mentioned, right? Leadership comes as a result of situations. Once individual identify situations and feel like there is a need for a change to happen, you can stop this person. The person is going to do whatever they are going to do to make sure that they achieve the change that they have identified from this challenge, right? So whoever exists as at the time in whatever movement you find yourself in should be ready and willing to open their mind up and understand that people are going to come with diverse approach to the same challenge. And we should be willing and ready to support them in creating that change. Because guess what? There is no one solution to any challenge in this world. If there was any one solution to challenge in this world, then UN should have solved all the world issues we are having now, right? Just when they are solving one particular issues, it creates multiple issues, right? So then we as leaders or wherever we find ourselves should always have it in the back of our mind that whatever we are trying to solve, we can't solve it on our own. There are multiple approaches to which we should create that room and allow for every other person who have the vision, the passion, the enthusiasm to support this individual in realizing their goals, right? And if there is a need for funding or support anywhere, once you're a leader, once you have been in situations like that, you should know how it feels. You should give all the support that is needed to whichever individual, irrespective of their age, right? To allow them to achieve whatever they have to achieve. And this, in the long run, goes to credit not just that individual, but you who have existed for the longest, because guess what? You supported this individual in realizing that goal. So you, one way or the other, also have or gain some form of recognition and respect and some goodwill from all of the work that this other person who you supported, grew, and built have been able to achieve from their leadership. Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I mean, I teared up a little because, you know, it's the story is the same across the board with so many different young people, where consistently we have to fight for space. So we fight for space in our homes, we fight for space in whatever work that we've gotten, and then we have to fight for space in a space that's supposed to be safe. And, you know, there are multiple layers of intersectionalities within that context. And with those intersectionalities, they come with vulnerabilities. And so, Denny, I'm going to refer to you now, and unfortunately, you might have the most difficult question yet. And I'm recognizing this because you've been part of these institutions that are seen as enablers. And so maybe you might have some insights, particularly as an activist, and probably as the person I've known here the longest. You know, from your perspective, what have you observed that can be changed or improved to create a conducive environment for these different diverse forms of civic action, one, and also recognizing that you can be queer, but be working on climate justice. You don't need to be working on HIV, right? That you can be queer and exercise that agency and create that visibility, even within the context of nuclear disarmament, right? And that we must consider this, especially when we look at other environments where there have been 5 coups over the past, 18 months in West Africa. We can't look at queer activism from a very linear lens, so to speak. But then how do we ensure that we're able to harness this diversity and sort of showcase just the talent and the sheer power that so many young queer activists have, not just in thinking, but also in their wholeness as in there's Black tax where they have to, exercise care and sort of, help provide for their families. There's the need to make sure that you're actually able to go to school because we don't all have parents who will allow us to skip school and, get into some form of protest action. The issues of safety, physically, economically, psychologically, and so many other variants. Yet I have to sit there and narrow myself in my diversity in an application so that you can give me money to do a kind of change that is palatable and acceptable to you. So how can we create a more enabling environment for young people to truly be who they are and thrive? Because belonging is not just about addressing needs, but it's also about fulfilling aspirations.
I'll first tackle this by saying that we are all queer, but queerness is, in essence, just a part of it's just one aspect of who we are. We also teachers, we are professors, we are lawyers, we're doctors, we're accountants, engineers, social workers, and everybody in society has a role to play, and that's what makes society go round. And having youth in such leadership, in positions of leadership that steer such professions and diversities in all aspects of the word of profession, is very key, because then it encourages other younger generations and other youth to see that there's potential in their work, that they can become disarmament nuclear scientists saving the world, that queer people are also for the environment, that queer persons are also for holistic social and economic development in their regions. So being in spaces, especially a lot of funding spaces, we generally have the problem whereby we have our own specific goals as we set and think that a community needs. We do not exactly consult them on what is their current need. So we end up funding projects that are linear, that prevent diversity. Like, for instance, an organization wants to express their passion through art and dance and literature, and they want to have, like, let's say, a trade fair day, but then no one wants to fund them because they don't consider it a form of active activism within their society. And then you find some just want to have a safe space shelter, just to put up like an internet cafe that's for queer folk, that's run by queer folk, but for the community. And through there, they can help like young people create their CVs, join libraries, hook them up with jobs, do their taxes, that kind of thing. No one wants to fund that. Everybody wants to fund what they generally think of the ideal as, oh my God, human rights, human rights, human rights. But human rights are just beyond civic advocacy in terms of legislation. It's also about social awareness and amenities and a way of life, because I cannot continue this movement if I am not safe, if I'm not educated, if I'm not sheltered, if I'm not okay. So are you funding other aspects of diversity in the youth's aspect of it to enjoy and showcase all that they experience to the world? And not just your perspective of the fact that, oh my goodness, I'm just going to fund SRH issues. I'm just going to fund AIDS. I'm just going to fund advocacy for decriminalization. Yet you're not funding increased welfare care packages, scholarships for like entry exams into universities. You're not supporting youth education or healthcare. You're not supporting folks in advocating for their own rights in terms of like discrimination in employment. Let's look, like, I'm happy that this place has actually had a lot of union members coming in and stepping forward and speaking about the discrimination that we face, especially in employment sectors, and just as employment, trade, like all sectors, we are really marginalized against. But this is not just in terms of just the economic aspect, but also now in the youth aspect. One, you're queer, and then you're young. Your progress in any level it's almost like a black tax, whereby you have to work twice as hard, be good as much, and still hide who you are just to make a step in the world. And then when you get there, you finally start having to open doors for the rest of the people to come. And that is one thing that we as queer folk need to do. And the older generations that are queer, that have made it and have become pillars in our society, need to do. Open up the spaces for us. You have reached there. It's now your duty to open the space for the younger people to explore and grow and blow up this movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denny. Yeah, feel free by all means. I think it's an open space. And I'm just so touched. Oh my good God. Like having this kind of a conversation 3 years ago was almost unimaginable. That's one. Secondly, I think, Liberty, I really, and I'm proud of this, in being the vice chair of Gender Dynamics, and, just recognizing that there was something that you said maybe 2 days ago, and it was a casual conversation. And as we're sharing with Denny and Cleo and others, I sat there and I'm like, that was the first time that I felt, and I became so unbelievably, emotional, because I felt seen. And I can't stress how important that is, because I never knew it before, with something that you said. And for me, it just reminds me of why representation is so important, right? And why that representation is really quite key when it comes to looking at how we can challenge these systems of privilege, of power, of patriarchy. And I think it's really quite important for us to recognize, how then do we really arrest these critical questions of leadership? Because what I've gotten from you all is that leadership is action. That's what it is. It's not a position, it's not an institution. And I think the reality of it is that in recognizing and harnessing this diversity, there is a need for a feminist lens. And how do we then unpack this and take this in a way that it can be meaningful, because you can't eat human rights. And in as much as, yes, there's so much progress within the context of South Africa's constitutional court and some of the inroads that have been made with, for instance, the equality courts, that isn't being taken up because the systems are still quite elitist, they are ableist. So how can we push for more intersectionality? How can we push, because the reality is that we would have assumed that Black people or diverse individuals assuming positions would mean that things will change. But now we're learning that it's not about the individual, it's about the system, right? And so how can we really challenge these systems that are impeding us from what liberation is? And for me, I love the words of Nina Simone when she says, liberation is having no fear. So having no fear that I will have repercussions for calling out a donor, having no fear of actually exercising agency and deciding I am going to start LGBT rights Ghana and you will not stop me. So how can we create that kind of environment that can be pan-African and that can be anchored on Ubuntu and that can be anchored on a feminist future? Because a lot of people don't recognize the importance of that. And a lot of people don't realize that the tools of the master aren't what breaks down the house.
So I think, Dumi, let me just say how proud I am to be led by you also in gender dynamics as a young person. And I think a young person with a very feminist lens around what does it mean to hold a young woman of color from a rural background whose first language is not English, who has a particular class experience in the world of poverty, stepping into the world, stepping into leadership with the intent on wanting to lead, but also very much recognizing that the systems that seeks to oppress are multiple and they are always operational, and pushing back against any form of emergence, any form of progress, any form of cementing of self for the purpose of opening up doors for others to also walk through that. So I really want to acknowledge that. And I felt that support. I think the way in which we are looking at progress in inverted commas, because it's always subjective, is really through a Western global North lens. And so the question becomes, how do we widen that lens to make sure that we integrate in transformative ways, African global South perspectives? And oftentimes what I find is that when even just through the narrow lens of human rights advancements, in many instances what I find is that for global North countries with particular GDPs each year, the conversation is civil political rights. For us, the struggle is multiple, at least twofold. It's both civil political, but also socioeconomic. And so what does it mean to step into a space with being deprived of your basic human rights, not being recognized, not having access to services, being socioeconomically disenfranchised, and then being expected to perform? And I think looking at it through that lens, we need to have a conversation of what does equity mean and not what does equality mean, because equality assumes that we are all moving from the same point and therefore we must all keep up with the pace as we go along, not recognizing that some by force has had a head start. And so how do we ensure that when we respond to the needs of diverse persons and leaders within particular contexts, we understand what you have spoken about, Denny, the intersectional realities that needs to be resourced and supported. So what does it mean to be able to provide someone with mental wellness support, leadership support, coaching, ensuring that that person has a decent salary to be able to afford housing, accommodation, food security? What does it mean to, at the same time, advance through policies and laws space whereby we can push back against the powers that seek to oppress? And here we're speaking about toxic masculinities, misogyny that's playing itself out. I mean, as a young woman of color leader, I don't only step into a space with my age being the one denominator that I need to confront oppression on. That older, more seasoned activists are pushing back in the space. It's also gender identity. So what does it mean to have to push back in the system against toxic masculinities, both from cisgender men as well as transgender men, and sometimes older men in these particular contexts, and try and hold space? What does it mean to, in feminist spaces, wanting to foreground the need for intergenerational solidarity, still being told that you know too little about this world by seasoned feminists in this space? So what does it mean to push back? And I think for me, I don't have any concrete answers, but really just the invitation that we need to trouble that much more. We need to trouble the role, how we are being oppressed in terms of not being able to bring our fullness, the fullness of our experiences to the fore in order to enhance the conversation. And what does it mean to not be apologetic when we do it? Because that's the only way in which we can move forward to make change happen.
Thank you so much, Liberty. I will speak to, trying to draw some of the lessons from history. And I know this is a conversation that we've had before, Alex, and I think, in looking at Ghana's, independence history and being the first African country liberated from colonialism, but recognizing that we still have colonial laws and very, very linear ways of being able to organize, and that there is no, it isn't always beautiful. It isn't nicely wrapped up to organize, right? It doesn't look pretty, particularly when we recognize there are always competing interests. We've got family who will be asking us questions, and they also have to come out on our behalf and sort of have to sort of declare and speak to certain things. And so what do you think we can draw from some of these lessons in the spirit of intergenerational leadership, but also just recognizing that there might be some inroads that we can gain if we look beyond just the narratives that dictate what advocacy looks like, and also, more importantly, some of the narratives that are very adamant on subjugating queer experiences in development discourse, in public discourse.
Thank you, Dumi. I think that, and interestingly, I think I was having even this conversation with, I don't know who else, no, not here, with one other friend, even here in this conference, where we attended the youth conference, right? The youth pre-conference. And then there was a conversation even around how ILGA is supposed to, or how ILGA incorporates youth in the work that they do, right? And I was listening to everybody speak, right? And then I was asking myself, right? I asked myself this question. ILGA is supposed to be an inclusive organization, right? An organization that know and understand the struggles of all oppressed groups, right? And for that matter, have seen the need to really push back against this oppression, right? But an institution with such a set of mind still having its youth struggle to even find space within its organization, I beg to ask the question, so then, how truly inclusive, tolerant, diverse are we as, first of all, individuals, and then two, in the spaces we are in, institutions, organizations, and all of that, are we actually truthful to ourselves, right? Because if we are truthful to ourselves, then I want to believe that we know and recognize all the struggles that exist. And yet, when we get the opportunity to help, support, encourage, create space and all of that, we don't do that. And so then the question really, we need to ask really like the question that, do we truly believe in what we believe in, or is it just a selfish interest? And that's what we are looking at, and it doesn't even matter whether you are a gay or like a bisexual, transgender, or like, as far as you are human, then the interest is actually to you and not any other person. But then you try to want to create that, facade that says that, oh, I care about you and I want to help you and I want to support you. Do you truly care? Do you truly want to support? If you do, then you know all of these things. So do your best as humans and wherever you find yourself, right? And so for me, I believe it's the question, irrespective. And for me, I want to look at it very general, right? Irrespective of where one finds themselves, you need to continuously ask yourself questions, right? You need to continuously, how you relate with your colleagues, whether old, young, in between. Am I truly looking at the interest of this person? Do I truly want the best of this person? If I truly want the best of the person, then I am in whatever capacity to make their person's lives better, right? If you pick funders, if you pick organizations and all of the ones you are engaging with the person one way or the other, the question still comes in there. If you're a funder and you want to fund me, do you truly want me to grow? Do you truly want me to become the organization that you are expecting me to become? Or is it just you trying to play the whole, creating the whole facade to just show off like, oh yeah, I'm supporting this person, blah, 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 but truly not the core issue is what you are looking at. And so this question is something that I believe that we need to continuously ask ourselves this question. And if we are truly and indeed truthful about wherever space we find ourselves and the things that we hope to achieve, then we can create that enabling environment that allows both youth, women, feminists, and every other group to live and thrive in the society for them to achieve their goal within that society. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I think it would be a missed opportunity not to speak about issues of accessibility and issues of, how, moving around with an African passport can be quite a challenge, whether in transit. And obviously it's quite important as an organizer or as a convener to consider those elements, not just to say, oh, I must behave in front of police, in recognizing my existence. And I think, there've been too many examples where young people have come back and this is the case in many instances that it's not safe to give that feedback because we don't know what might be implied as a repercussion, or we don't know what might be, the response to that. But then you speak about so many facets that for me, when I look at it structurally, it then speaks to how social justice movements have been anchored on solidarity and collaboration. Workers' rights have always been working in tandem with civil rights movements. Similarly, when we're looking at even just the anti-apartheid, anti-colonial discourse and how the arts were quite engaged in calling out and extending solidarity. And so my question to you, Blais, is, these elements of visibility, right? So people want to support me because now I'm visible and now I'm seen, right? But somehow there's always something that's predetermined and there might be an alternative motive in that I'm not seen in my fullness as an individual. For you in navigating those waters and emerging, how do you see a young activist that wants to take action and maybe doesn't garner as much attention and doesn't and isn't always seen in the same way in that, oh, now let us endow you with something so that you can actually take your work further?
To me, what you just described now, everything you described is me. Everything you just described is me. And I'm glad that you asked me this question because it's largely about what I have done and the consequences of my action and what I am seeing now. So during the NSAS movement in Nigeria in 2020, I had a viral video which was me screaming "Queer Lives Matter" on the street of Lagos. And it had 3.3 million views. And everyone started talking to me. I got messages from big US media, got from other international media. I was published everywhere. People reached out to me to support me and my organization. And this kept on going for some months. And later I realized it was dying down. I realized I wasn't so important anymore. Despite the work I did, I've been neglected, and there was somebody else who they were waiting for to just come up like that, have a viral video and capitalize on that, and put them as the face of their brand so as to get more support. This really speaks to the tokenism we are talking about today. Our big corporate organization play on our moment, our vulnerable moment, on our nearly to die moments just for their brand, to save their face and make people see they are doing something. It's also pinkwashing in the sense that the rainbow is always used as a form of gathering support when in actual sense, people are not really doing anything about our struggles. There's this whole false advertisement of LGBTQ rights progression in the world. People think this movement is progressing so fast. I mean, if you ask a random Nigerian, what's up? What do you think about homosexuality? Like in America, they are doing it. Everyone on the street, it's happening, and they are carrying flags everywhere. And in the actual sense, I'm in America and I don't even feel safe as a gay person. So there's this old lie that has been fed to us in Africa and different parts of the world. And America keeps keeping up with this standard. That's why they took my videos and they posted it everywhere in their market to keep up that status. So I feel it all boils down. The solution to it now would be the honesty of our queerness, because most of these brands, they have, as we said earlier, you can have representation in a place and still nothing would happen. So some of them have representatives who are queer, who are young people, but do they really know what they are doing? That's the question. Do they really know what they are doing? Some of them do not know what they are doing. They've been sold to the master and the master is using them as their tools. So it's very important that we realize also that not everyone have our interest in mind. So even when we're making decisions or picking somebody to make decisions for us, we have to look at it from the intersectional lens. What are the identities of this person? Will this person cover, when this person is there, will the person also talk about the needs of other people that don't identify as them or have the same identity as them? So yes, we want people like this to speak up for us in spaces like that. So when this whole thing happened and I had my videos everywhere, and after 6 months, everything died down. The next person came, they took the story like that, and it keeps going and going and going and going and going. And we ask ourselves, are funders, corporate bodies really interested in this change we want, or they are just interested in the false advertisement, which at the end of it misinforms a lot of people and does more harm to the society? I mean, I come to America with the expectation that I will be safe, and then I'm killed. Does it make sense? It doesn't make sense at all. So it's very, very important that there's the honesty in this queerness that we talk about. I mean, queerness for me is the truth. Queerness for me is the way forward. If you are able to deconstruct how normal human sexuality is normal, in quotes, how normal human sexualities and genders that have been perceived for years can be seen in newer ways, in truthful ways, in their true form, then you can deconstruct many things. You can deconstruct racism. You can deconstruct all other structures of oppression, because at the end of it, queer people are at the bottom. When people identify racism, they take away the queerness from it because they believe that, okay, identities can exist separately. I mean, queer identities and colors can exist separately, while in the actual sense, they cannot exist separately. They have to exist in one because the carrier is a one person. So I just think it's very, very important for us to reimagine ways, reimagine possibilities, and go beyond the capitalistic way of doing things, which is taking a moment out of someone's life, maybe their vulnerable moment, and making so much money out of it, and in return, not caring about the person and their safety.
Thank you so much, Blaise. I think it's very important, and it's very key because young people's perspectives are often co-opted, if not weaponized, and that this can be really quite violent in variant ways. And just before I open up for questions, Denny, I want to find out, from your perspective, the issues of visibility are quite it's political, right? In the same way that we sit and say funding's not political, that human rights work is not political, but we know it's political, it's personal, it's deeply personal, and that's political. And I'm wondering if, from your own perspective and just with what you've observed and just some of the experiences that you've gone through, and that, we know that, as young people, sometimes it can be quite a challenge to be able to articulate issues, right? And I like giving the example where at some point in our lives, we, not just contemplated, but we sold blowjobs, and no one would sit there and say, oh, we're sex workers, but just the reality in that, these are moments that are really quite integral to who we are, and they can get to a point where they do define what kind of journey that we do take in terms of trajectories, right? And we don't often see activism as career work, right? And we don't have the privilege of social protections, whether it's medical aid or whether the ability to sit and say, oh, I'm going to take leave, because we know that we've got so many fires to put out at, institutional, collective and movement levels. And so I'm wondering if you think that there is a way for us to be able to navigate these structures, these norms, these standards, and these expectations without taking away our truths. Is that, can I be a neurodivergent individual and still be able to be palatable enough for sustained funding, and still be able to find myself in a situation where I want to call out and I can call that media house, and that they can actually act on that without waiting for a viral video? How can we really be true in our diverse selves within these institutions and these structures?
Thank you, Dumi. Okay, this one is actually quite complex. So we come in society, we're just supposed to be able to, express ourselves just normally. Just is this thing on?
Yes.
We're supposed to be able to express ourselves in all our dynamic versions and forms, and unfortunately, it doesn't really happen. And some of the challenges that we experience, especially as diverse youth of different genres and colors and backgrounds, is first that nuance that we do not have the capacity to make our own decisions. We don't have the capacity to think for ourselves. We don't have the capacity to self-organize, and that we have to be supervised in order for things to work. And yet people forget that these are our stories and our lived realities. You can't teach me how to live my life, and I've lived this body for 30 years. So this expectation of a savior complex that elder folk have on the youth, that we are coming to save you, we're coming to show you, yet we know what we want. We just need the space and the funding to do so. A lot of what has just been mentioned, like what happened to Blais, is also this opportunistic funding that most donors in the higher echelons have of building capacity for their resources. So what happens is they find a nice viral video or something that's trending and going to have a lot of ratings, and they go and resource mobilize, and they get a lot of charitable funds in, and they pocket. Then they just give you a tap on the back. They're like, oh, yay, thank you, you're lucky, good for you. And they move on to the next best thing. It's almost like having a sugar daddy who gets a younger model of you. And so what happens now is that there is no long-term support. Like I said, no one has asked themselves, so what happens afterwards? The security part, the sustainability of the project that they began, the documentation of the full story. And that is one thing that we need to ask ourselves, as donors, are we being intentional in our funding? Do we really care about what is happening with these people? Because if you cared, first you'll have actually ensured that you invested enough in that person and that organization to have the capacity it needs to fulfill its mandate to its community. Then you'd also instill capacity support for its staff members to be able to train and further develop the folk around them and bring them up. Then you'd also have a sustainable funding model to ensure that the operations are able to continue until a certain point whereby they can pick themselves up. This also includes training mechanisms, resource mobilization mechanisms in those societies, invitations to scholarships, to have scholarships and interchange, what do you call it, exchange programs and everything. And also the thing of allowing for organizations to build reserves of some sort, like they need to find ways of saving money so they can find an income generating activity of their own that can stop the cycle, this need cycle of constantly needing funds, because this is what happens now in our youth today, is that we're insecure. There's no security. I'll start something today and 2 years from now, it's not going to exist. There's no continuity in the movement. And that's what's fragmenting and it's really frustrating the youth right now. And so as youth, one thing I think we should push back on is to insist on one core funding. No more parameter conditional funding where I want to see your SRH, your MEL parameters and your advocacy record. No, we need to be advocating for core support, general support that has no strings attached. I've given you a proposal what I want to do. Trust me to do it, and I'll give you the report back. We need to rally up and be like, you know what, we are not desperate anymore. You can't keep on making us do the dirty work and then not having to be taken account of and not being acknowledged for it. Why are you, yes, you're supporting us, but we're making a name for you. And we're making your organizations look so good and so philanthropic and humanitarian. But is there real truth to that care? If there's no sustained development process throughout the whole story, you don't even have a phasing out program. You just drop a grantee partner like a hot potato with no transformative support. Does that show that you really are invested in the work that they are doing? And that's why we need to apply a feminist lens towards our movement now and see what is ethical, what is true, what is the real message of philanthropy. Is it just token ticking boxes that I have a youth organization, that I have a youth member, a person of color, a queer person in my organization, yet they have no agency or power, where and you put me in a position, but my decision-making means naught because it'll just be overrun, that I'll be heard but not heard, that I'll be silenced, that everything I do will be weaponized against me because of my opinion and I cannot question, I should just do, where you refuse, it's your mandate, and it's everybody's mandate in a position of leadership to train the people under them and to insist on their social development. So what is your job then if you do not know when to step down and let me take the reins? What is your job when you are not training me to succeed and take over? We have the biggest issue right now in our youth organizing and movements because of this bad age gap. The older people are aging out. The younger people are here trying to transform, but they don't have the capacity because people become gatekeepers, holding on to everything. And then older organizations are trying as much as best to sabotage new growing organizations, just because of the age gap and competition for funds, owning space and not trying to accommodate everybody else. Why not collaborate? And that's what we also need to come up as youth, not look at each other as competitors. Looked at each other as a common source of knowledge, a common source of social power, common source of advocacy. And it's by being collaborative and in solidarity with each other that we're able to tackle all these disruptive forces that try to fragment us, because all of us are being held desperate because everybody has their own lived reality, but they're all intersectional and we have common issues. So can we rally on the common issues together? And then when we are able to solve these common issues, sometimes you find that the catalytic effect is that a lot of our individual problems get solved in the process. It's like a domino effect. So really, 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 we need to, one, push back and say no more to this linear way of doing things and telling us what to do. And at the same time, the people at the top need to step up and realize, are they being intentional? And is this youth agenda a real youth agenda, or is it just one of those policies that are made, created, spend billions of dollars across the world to invent, then go sit on a shelf somewhere and are only used for legislative purposes when referring to something? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denny. I mean, this is a beautiful intersectional meal and I cannot stop enjoying it. I actually just realized that, we're over time, but I think, if there are any questions, please do feel free. Please do raise a hand. I hope it would be targeted at one specific person. If not, then we will be wrapping up just to respect time. Any questions? Going once, going twice? Great, thank you. So I think maybe just, it would be great to have some parting shots, because I know that maybe there might be something that you might want to affirm, critique, or challenge that someone else has also mentioned. And so I think this is a great opportunity to do so. So I'm not sure. Maybe let's start with you, Blaise.
Okay, so I'm just going to add to what I said earlier, and I just want to give this advice to young people who are building up spaces. I am the co-founder of the Oasis project, and we started just a year ago. And since then, we've hosted 5 events, and we've had up to 500 people in attendance. And up till today, in Nigeria, my work doesn't really get as much recognition. It's very discouraging, very, very discouraging. But we are doing the work, and it's evident in the things we put out and the people who have benefited from our services. So I would want to tell young people to keep going. I think you asked me this question, what advice am I giving to young people? To keep going. And for us, it's more than the recognition that comes with it. I mean, we are so keen on changing the narrative, changing the world. And it's about that, not the recognition that comes with it. So just keep doing what you are doing. I mean, someday things will change for good, and it's all that matters. When things change, the structures will fall, and we will get the better life that we all want.
Okay, so I mean, my last words will be that so there is a saying, right, that once you are born, you are going to die, right? But in between between life and death is what you do, right? Irrespective of your age. So I would say that everybody, irrespective of which struggle you find yourself, to be true to yourself and the people you are engaging with, and especially the youth. Because guess what? You've been a youth before. If you are older, and you know how challenging and how stressful it is for youth to try to find themselves in these struggles. So if you are indeed truthful to yourself and to the cause to which you are pushing, then please create that enabling environment that allows for every other person to thrive. And that's the only way that we can grow collectively and collectively show off as we are the ones that did and made this change happen. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Well, my parting shot would be to the youth is to remain resilient and to continue pushing and advocating for change, and to find and own their space. Like, find it, own it, occupy it, riot for it, everything you need to do it, because nothing for us without us. So you really, really need to put in the work and just occupy your space by force, because unfortunately the world is not such a kind place for folks who just are complacent and roll over backwards and just get tickled and you're like, yay, everything's okay. No, you need to fight, and you need to think of the long game. You need to fight it intelligently. Don't go cause a ruckus, and choose your battles wisely, but please cause a lot of noise as possible and fight for your space. And then also that your time will come. Eventually time comes, so don't give up. And then to the donors and to the folk who work in philanthropy and people in policy making, I would say we just become more intentional about things, and we need to come to a point of core and capacity support for everyone, and just do things out of love, I guess. Like, let's think long term. Let's stop taking short-term boxes. Let's think of our movement 5-10 years from now, not every fiscal year. No, it's time for us to think of the progressional growth of the movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denny. And I think, just before giving it to the future co-host of the next ILGA conference, it's really quite important. I think even more importantly, with everything that you've said, is the need for rest. Young people to recognize the need for rest, the need to recuperate, and that, Audre Lorde did say it is a revolution, and that we need to be there tomorrow and not light ourselves up, which I wish and I hope that many of us can start trying to practice, even though that's not the world that we've known. And so the last word, our future co-host, Liberty.
I think I'm going to say something a little bit not so PC. For us, particularly within the African context and the Global South context, it is becoming increasingly clear that the world is almost imploding. The global north is almost collapsing in terms of the various crises that we are seeing globally. And to that extent, we need young, bold leadership, unapologetic leadership to continue emerging from our context in order to toe the line for progress, because we need to create a counter narrative to the colonial lens that we have been sold and that we are expected to consume time and time again. So what does it mean for us to increasingly emerge within our leadership capabilities, own space, take up space in being able to produce that counter narrative? But whilst we are doing that, also being critical in the ways in which we choose to occupy leadership. Are we occupying it in ways that are hierarchical orientated, or are we occupying it in ways that uphold power sharing models to ensure that the future is truly inclusive, the future is truly transformed? And I even use the word inclusive and inclusion very loosely, because I don't think that it does justice to what we seek to achieve in future. When we include, we always exclude. That is how the cycle goes. And so what does it mean to really meaningfully, through our praxis, our ideology, our practice, transform so that we don't have to in future sit with situations, complex situations, where every single time we include certain bodies, we exclude other bodies in the process. And very much not pursuing notions of equality. Again, we are not departing from the same starting point, but rather upholding notions of equity. And what does it mean to equitably resource individuals, organizations, collectives, young people, to be able to do the work that we need to do in order to change the future?
Thank you.